Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We are taking a break today from many of the stories which have consumed most of our time on Cut the Clutter because they are the most cluttered stories these days. Coronavirus pandemic, there is the India-China situation in Ladakh. There is also our domestic politics, something or the other is always happening there. There is also American politics these days that we've been talking about, particularly with protests there and Donald Trump being Donald Trump. Can never stay out of headlines. We are stepping away from all that today and talking about Pakistan. Not because anything has happened between Pakistan and India that needs immediate attention or that is cluttered, because most stuff that happens between Pakistan and India is quite simple. So you have to search for a cluttered issue. So something's happened in Pakistan which has escaped our attention, which I think needs some lifting of layers, which I'm trying to do today. So first of all, check out a story from Bloomberg, from fine Bloomberg correspondents. I'm giving you a link with the description today on how, with Imran Khan's waning popularity, Pakistan's army is sort of formally moving in. Pakistan's army is never really far away from power structures. Either they, for 70% of the time since the country came into being, not became independent, but came into being, the army has controlled its political power directly. The rest, it's always behind the scenes. And the few times when it was denied that space, it has had consequences. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto denied that space in early 70s, and see what happened to him. Hanged, jailed and hanged. Nawaz Sharif tried to do that when he came with a big majority. See what happened to him. He was jailed and exiled. So that is what happens to a democratically elected leader. Imran Khan's government was different, because Imran Khan's government was seen as a government elected with the army's blessings. Not only elected with the army's blessings, but also put together with the army's blessings, because Imran Khan did not get, or his coalition did not get, half the seats in national parliament. So through defections, arm twisting, allurement of so many smaller parties and others, his majority was put together. Now, you would have thought that this is going smoothly now. Now the army has its own person. The person who is in power is never going to challenge the army, and he was never going to challenge the army, although what he promised in the past, which was Naya Pakistan, he always tried to say, and all the time you can find some old interview clip of his where he says कि अब ऐसे नहीं होगा कि यहाँ सब फैसले ISI करे या आर्मी करे, प्राइम मिनिस्टर करेगा. But obviously since he's come to power, he's now turning out to be probably the weakest prime minister, elected prime minister in Pakistan since 1988, 1989. We say that because that's in 1988 Zia-ul Haq died and Pakistan started to get elections. Although you remember, after that also Musharraf came in for a very long time. Now, what exactly has happened? So if you read this Bloomberg story, you will see that now quite rapidly Pakistani army is moving in. It's serving and recently retired officers into key civilian positions in Imran Khan's government. So these positions include also communication advisor to Imran Khan, which is like the chief communications, PR, media relations person with him. Who's that? He's somebody that many of us are familiar with. He's Lieutenant General Asim Bajwa, who as Major General used to be the spokesperson or spokesman of ISPR, that is Inter-Services Public Relations. So he was DG ISPR in Pakistan. We knew his Twitter handle very well. He retired as a Lieutenant General. He is now communication advisor to the Prime Minister. So communication advisor to the Prime Minister is a powerful position. And to just underline to you the fact that he's not just another retired officer serving in a bureaucratic role, he's also been put in charge of a $60 billion investment project in the Chinese-sponsored BRI project in India. BRI is Belt and Road Initiative. So that is one key position which the army has now right next to the Prime Minister. Then you have the head of PIA, Pakistan International Airlines. soldier. Pakistan's power regulator is a soldier, is a general. Pakistan's National Institute of Health head is a general, and it is Pakistan's NIH which is leading Pakistan's pandemic response. NIH is leading Pakistan's pandemic response. As you can say, ICMR is leading India's pandemic response. Now, can you imagine it can happen? Ostensibly, if a lot of things happen in a certain way in a democracy, but in Pakistan, almost naturally, a general has moved into that position. In fact, Pakistan's lockdown was declared not by its prime minister, but by its army, by the generals. So these are the big changes that are taking place now. In fact, all the press conferences that you see, if you see this Bloomberg story, they have details. All the press conferences on the pandemic response, you find uniformed officers hanging around there and basically helping civilians, or seemingly helping civilians. But you can see which is the hand that controls the strings of who's the puppet, and who has the hands controlling the strings to the puppet. Now, this has come about in addition to another dozen Musharraf loyalists. Musharraf loyalists means these were people who were either ministers or held key positions in General Musharraf's government. General Musharraf's dictatorial, unelected government. 12 of those people are now in Imran Khan's cabinet as well. So once again, the armies made sure that, as remember Asrani said in Sholay, हमारे आदमी चारों तरफ फैले हुए हैं. In this case, Imran Khan के चारों तरफ फैले हुए हैं. So he's been surrounded by them. These include very important people. These include Interior Minister or Home Minister, which is retired Brigadier Ijaz Shah. Remember, we had mentioned his name in connection with Daniel Pearl's murder, because the murderer and conspirators' links were traced to him. There is also Abdul Hafiz Sheikh, who's financial advisor to the Prime Minister. There is also an organization called Naya Pakistan Housing Program Task Force. Now, Naya Pakistan was Imran Khan's slogan for Pakistan. Naya Pakistan Housing Program Task Force is supposed to implement his massive plan, his flagship plan to build low-cost houses in Pakistan. Now, that is headed by a person called Zagam Rizvi, who spent 10 years at the World Bank looking at housing projects or housing issues. He's now been given a bunch of army officers to serve. And there is a statement in the story, Bloomberg story from Zagam Rizvi, saying that it is good to have a majority of officers as army officers because you get the sense that they get the job done. Now, why is this happening? Because the army itself should not feel insecure, because unlike Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif in the past, you've seen no indication at all on Imran Khan's part to either defy the army or not do exactly what the army wants him to do, because he is the army's selected prime minister. Many years ago, on my first visit to Pakistan in 1985, Itraz Ehsan, who later became Pakistan's interior minister or home minister, wonderfully brilliant lawyer from Lahore, he said to me, and 85 is when Zia was bringing in some kind of democracy called partyless democracy, and Muhammad Khan Junejo had become prime minister. So what is partyless politics? You can find your own definitions of it, but I mean, to me, partyless politics is like cricket without a bat and ball, if you can have such a thing. So he had described that politics as bonsai democracy. He said Zia has given, or the army, the only democracy the army will accept in Pakistan is a bonsai democracy. So what this means is that democracy can become a very big tree and can grow very fast, and then may be difficult to control it. So it's best to let it grow or make it grow as a bonsai which you can put in a pot, put it on the shelf, to impress the Americans and the rest of the world that I have democracy, but ensuring that it doesn't grow very deep or very wide roots or branches. So that is the kind of democracy that Pakistani army has liked, and Imran was quite happy to be a bonsai in this environment. I mean, I know I'm saying this on a day when Imran Khan has offered help to India of his program and technology to get money to poor people. There is freedom of speech. You can say what you want. At least for the Prime Minister of Pakistan, that much freedom of speech when he's talking about India. Nevertheless, to get back to the point, why is it so that you think army is impatient? So I'm reading up stuff on Pakistan, and one more article you should read is article by Aisha Siddiqa, who is one of the foremost experts on Pakistani politics, but also Pakistan's armed forces, author of really widely explained, widely acclaimed books worldwide. So you see her column also on the print.in. Again, I'm giving you a link. And she points out in another story as we go ahead discussing this, that one reason the Pakistani army or the Pakistani militablishment, as it's called, military establishment, irritated is because of something called the 18th Amendment. Now, 18th Amendment to the Constitution is something that was passed in 2010 when PPP government was in power. Asif Ali Zardari was the boss. And what was that amendment? That amendment curtailed the powers of the president, loosened the powers of the central government, which in Pakistan is called the federal government, devolved more powers to the states, including a better allocation of financial resources to the states. So it made Pakistan a more federal country, and in spirit and letter it took Pakistan back to the 1973 constitution that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had promulgated, because PPP, Pakistan People's Party, swears by that constitution. Now, if you devolve more money to the states, the federal government is left with less money. The less money the federal government is left with, the less money it has to spend on the Pakistani army. Pakistani army doesn't bother about any audit, any accountability, nothing. They take what they want. But in this case, if less money is available, how do you handle it? So the current army chief of Pakistan, General Bajwa, Qamar Ahmad Bajwa, he's been talking about this. In fact, in 2019, there was a statement by him where he compared this 18th Amendment with late Mujibur Rahman's 6-point program, which many in Pakistan blame for having broken up the country. And he said that this can break up the country as much as Sheikh Mujib's 6-point plan had done. So 18th Amendment is what the army wants something done about. Now, and I will tell you the context in which Aisha wrote this, because that's a very interesting story also. And remember the name Cynthia Ritchie, I will come to her before we conclude. So Pakistan government, Imran's government, has been trying to get around it. Now, Pakistan People's Party can't oppose it because they were the authors of this amendment. But if they have to do this in their parliament or National Assembly, they will need support, because this is still a minority government in Pakistan, or almost a minority government. So to get around it, now this government, Imran Khan's government, obviously at the army's behest, is now trying to find ways to loosen it up, particularly as the 10th National Finance Commission is coming up. In many ways, our processes are not very different. We have the 14th Finance Commission going on in India. Pakistan is dealing with the 10th Finance Commission. And the issue again is devolution of finances, revenues to the states. So now a new stratagem that this government has come up with is to then ask all the provinces to also pay for the expenses, quote unquote, that the federal government is incurring on what they call as Azad Kashmir, or what we call as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So the expenses they incur on Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit Baltistan. So they say, why should the central government pay for all this? Every province should also take a share in that. which means every province has to cede some money to the federal government. So federal government's kitty increases. But in the process, they are also trying to find a way to give a representative each for their side of Kashmir, for Pak occupied Kashmir, which they call as AJK, and also Gilgit-Baltistan representatives on this council, on their National Finance Commission, 10th National Finance Commission. Once that happens, it has other implications. Either it has implications for India, you will get an immediate protest from India because India has declared Gilgit-Baltistan, the area beyond line of control, is part of India's map, and India underlined that again with the abrogation of Article 370 last year. So there will be an immediate sharp reaction from India that Pakistan, instead of, is now even giving up the pretense that the final status of Kashmir is to be decided through a plebiscite or whatever. That is their view. But it is also getting a pushback from Pakistan's opposition. So Bilawal Zardari, who now heads Pakistan People's Party, he said that this amounts to accepting India's abrogation of Article 370 and going into and walking into a trap, which is a little bit like, he said, udhar aap, idhar aap, which means you have that side, we have this side. So he sees this as a formal or informal acceptance of Article 370 abrogation by India. So this is leading to the second set of problems. Now, why did I say that from this I lead on to somebody called Cynthia Ritchie? Now, Cynthia Ritchie is an American woman. We don't know her exact age, but maybe mid-30s, thereabouts. If you read up all the stuff about her, I don't know how much to trust her, all the stuff that's written about her, because you read that she's a graduate of Louisiana University, but then there are several other universities mentioned after that, reputed universities, and I think one of the degrees or diplomas that she mentions against her name is also communications. So we don't know. But she's been in Pakistan for 10 years. Now, and she's been quite a presence. There are pictures of her. You can go and you can Google and see so many of them. You will also see some on our screen. Now, she has suddenly come up with a bunch of allegations. So, May 28, she made an allegation on Twitter saying that Benazir Bhutto, when she was Prime Minister, she would get her guards in the Prime Minister's house to rape the women her husband Asif Ali Zardari was having affairs with. So this was her way of taking revenge on her husband and on these women for having relationships with her husband. Obviously, it got a sharp response from Pakistan People's Party, including from my friend Farhanaz Ispahani, who lives in Washington now. She used to be the spokesperson of the PPP, saying that this is preposterous and you are saying this about a martyr, somebody who got killed in the line of her public life, Benazir Bhutto. And that's what Sherry Rahman, who again is a senior PPP leader, former journalist. I met her first when she was the editor of Herald magazine in Karachi. She also said this. Now, if this was not enough, Cynthia Ritchie then came up with another set of allegations. She said that 3 of the senior most leaders of Pakistan People's Party, that is Rahman Malik, former Home Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani, the former Prime Minister, and Makhdoom Shahabuddin, the former Finance Minister. Just to tell you, Makhdoom, in fact, Yusuf Raza Gilani is also called Makhdoom Yusuf Raza Gilani. These are Gaddi Nashin or Sajjada Nashins or hereditary heads of some Sufi saints' seats. Both of them are descendants of famous Sufi saints. So these two and Rahman Malik, she said, raped her or physically molested her. Now these allegations came out of the blue. Then in one interview in the past, she also said that while Rahman Malik, she alleged raped her, after that he offered her $2,000. And she doesn't say that she took it then, but she says finally she took it and kept it. So that is all the stuff that you will read in Aisha Siddiqa's article. So please Read that. And then she goes on and on to say some other interesting things. For example, she says, now there was the murder in a fake encounter of a man called Naqibullah Masood. You can see pictures. Now, Naqibullah Masood was a very poor man from Waziristan, very poor and not really educated man from Waziristan. When Pakistani army had its big Zarb-e-Azb operation in Waziristan, a lot of the people from there, particularly young men, left and came to the big cities, especially Karachi, to escape. So he was one of those. So in Karachi, in the area called Sorab Goat, he set up a little kapde ki dukaan, a little garment shop or a textile shop. Just a man of modest means. Sorab Goat is not a posh area of Karachi. In fact, it's part of a large urban slummy sprawl of Malir, which has the cantonment, etc. also, but this is a slummy area, so bit like Dharavi, though not exactly. So he came in, a poor man from Waziristan, set up a shop there. He was very good looking. He was spotted in the course of time by some talent hunters who took pictures of him and turned him into quite a popular model, and he built himself a big fan following, and it was growing. When he was killed, he was just a little over 26. He had been married, as often happens in those parts, you get married early. He had been married, had three children, but was now becoming very popular as a model. He was picked up by an SP, Rao Anwar, who was seen to be close to Pakistan People's Party. Remember, Pakistan People's Party rules Sindh, and Karachi is the capital of Sindh. On January 3rd, he was picked up with some others. They were all called terrorists. 3 of them were released. On Jan 13, he was found shot in the back. 3 more were shot along with him, some at close range. You could see that they had been tortured, and his body was handed over to his family. Now, this led to a lot of protests, because this is also around time the Pashtun Tahaffuz Nawaz, that is PTM movement, is picking up in Pakistan, and they protested about his assassination, because this was absolutely a fake encounter. The police although claimed that he was a terrorist or was involved with a terrorist organization. Now, why was he killed? So Cynthia Ritchie again came up with a theory of her own, saying that he was killed because he was dating Benazir Bhutto's daughter, Bilawal Zardari. And that's because the father didn't want that daughter should be dating a goof. Now, you might suddenly be surprised, thinking, though this sounds very outlandish. Just a kapde ka dukaan wala in one tiny area of Karachi, or Sorab Goat. I don't know how to describe Sorab Goat for you. It will be a bit like any of the Trans-Jamna crowded colonies of Delhi. So but he was a very attractive man, good looking man. You see his pictures. And when he came to Karachi, some usual talent hunters found him, and he began to rise as a model of some kind, with a fan following. So the allegation that Benazir Bhutto's daughter was dating him, the father didn't like it, so he got his police to kill him. That led to trouble by PTM. Now, what does all this add up to? If you look at Cynthia Ritchie's record and see Aisha Siddiqua's article, she's obviously been doing stuff for the army and the ISI by way of propaganda, by way of propagating Pakistan's image across the world. That's the reason it's a mystery. How does she get a 10-year business visa to live in Pakistan? What does she do? Nobody knows. There are pictures of her riding a bicycle in Peshawar. Obviously, she can only do it if she's got protection right behind her. So with all that, why is she attacking these PPP leaders right now? And the interpretation is that is also happening because the army and the establishment need to put the PPP under pressure. Now, politically, PPP doesn't matter right now, but this is to put them under pressure now, so that whatever they want done with the 18th Amendment can now be done. So this is a complicated story. I don't think I can find a more cluttered story than this, and I hope I've been able to make sense of it. But see, in this story, there is Pakistan's internal politics, there is the army, there is a young American woman, there are allegations of rape, sex, murder, assassination, and there is Kashmir, and there is the India angle as well. So I'd say a typical Pakistan politics story.